Welcome to the quiet verdict, where every story ends with justice. My ex-husband divorced me on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, I was sleeping in my car behind a grocery store with $43 in my bank account and a garbage bag full of clothes in the back seat. And by Monday, he was calling me 17 times in a row because someone inside his law firm had made a mistake, a very expensive mistake. You see, my husband spent 11 years convincing me I was worthless, too quiet, too emotional, too poor, too dependent on him to survive on my own. And honestly, by the end of the marriage, I believed him. I worked night shifts cleaning hotel rooms while he built luxury apartment complexes with his name printed in silver letters across the front. Damien Brooks. CEO, visionary, self-made millionaire. That was the version of him the world knew. The version I knew was different. I knew how he spoke to waitresses when nobody important was watching. I knew how quickly his voice changed the moment we were alone. And I knew exactly when he stopped seeing me as a wife and started seeing me as an inconvenience. The divorce only took 19 minutes. 19 minutes to erase 11 years. His lawyer called our marriage financially uncomplicated. That phrase stayed with me. Financially uncomplicated, as if my entire life could be summarized in legal vocabulary. Damien kept the penthouse, the cars, the company, the vacation house in Scottsdale, and me? I walked out of court with one suitcase, an old Honda Civic, and enough humiliation to last the rest of my life. Or at least, that's what he expected. Because 3 weeks after the divorce, I received an email that was never meant to reach me. Attached to it was a document, one signature, one forgotten signature buried inside 87 pages of corporate paperwork. And hidden inside that paperwork was my name, not as a wife, not as a beneficiary, as an owner. 30% owner of Brooks Urban Development. The company my ex-husband had just spent 19 minutes claiming belonged entirely to him. That was the moment I realized something important. Damien hadn't just underestimated me. He had forgotten me. And forgotten people are dangerous. My name is Elena Brooks, and this is the story of how my ex-husband accidentally handed me the weapon that destroyed him. I met Damien when I was 23 years old and cleaning office buildings on the night shift in downtown Charlotte. Back then, he wasn't rich yet. Ambitious, yes. Confident in a way that made people stop talking when he entered a room. But not rich. He wore the same 2 suits every week and drove a 10-year-old Lexus with a broken air conditioner. The first time he spoke to me, I was vacuuming the lobby of a small real estate office at almost midnight. He walked in carrying blueprints under one arm and a gas station coffee in the other. "You work too hard," he said. I remember laughing softly. "You don't even know me." He smiled. "I know it's midnight and you're still working while everyone else is asleep." At the time, that felt romantic, like being noticed. And for a while, he really did notice me. He brought me coffee during my shifts, walked me to my car at night, remembered small things, the way I hated onions, the fact that I called my mother every Sunday, the way I got quiet when I was anxious. When you're poor your entire life, attention can feel a lot like love. We got married 2 years later in a small church outside Asheville. Nothing expensive. My dress cost $180. His ring was slightly too big because we couldn't afford resizing before the ceremony. And honestly, those were probably the happiest years of my life. Before the money, before the assistance, before Damien learned how powerful people behave when they stop fearing consequences. His company grew slowly at first. One duplex, then another, then small apartment buildings, then investors started calling. Then newspapers started writing articles about the brilliant young developer changing Charlotte's skyline. And somewhere during all of that, he changed. Not suddenly. That would have been easier to understand. It happened in pieces, like watching someone slowly step farther and farther away, until one day you realize you can't reach them anymore. The first thing that changed was how he spoke to people, especially people he thought were beneath him. Waiters, receptionists, cleaning staff, people like me. Then came the business dinners where wives were expected to stay quiet and smile while men discussed money. Then the criticism started. Small at first. You could try harder with your appearance. You don't really understand how business works. You get emotional too easily, each sentence tiny on its own. But tiny things repeated for years become architecture. Eventually, you start living inside them. By the time Damien turned 40, he owned half the luxury developments uptown. We lived in a penthouse overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble countertops, a wine room neither of us used, and somehow I had never felt lonelier in my life. I stopped working after his third major project succeeded, not because I wanted to, because Damien insisted. It looks strange having my wife cleaning hotel rooms, he told me one night, not cruelly, matter of fact, like discussing weather. So I stayed home, cooked dinners, attended charity events, smiled beside him in photographs, and slowly disappeared from my own life. The affair started long before I discovered it. Women always know earlier than they admit to themselves. The late meetings, the second phone, the sudden gym memberships, the way he started dressing carefully even on weekends. But the moment I truly knew happened on a Tuesday in March. I was dropping off paperwork at his office because he'd forgotten it at home. His assistant, Vanessa, opened the door. 26 years old. Perfect hair. Perfect teeth. The kind of woman who had never once doubted her own reflection. She looked surprised to see me. Not guilty. Just surprised. And behind her, in Damien's office, I saw my husband quickly standing up from the couch and adjusting his tie. Nobody spoke for maybe 3 seconds. But sometimes 3 seconds is enough to end a marriage. That night, Damien didn't even deny it. He poured himself a drink, sat across from me in the kitchen, and calmly said something I still remember word for word. I didn't plan for this to happen, but I deserve to be happy too. I stared at him, 11 years together, and somehow that was the sentence he chose. Not sorry, not ashamed, just entitled. I asked him one question. What happens to us now? He looked down into his glass for a long moment before answering. I think it would be better if we handled this like adults. Adults. That's what rich people call betrayal when they want you to accept it quietly. 3 days later, his lawyer contacted me about divorce proceedings. The divorce process moved faster than grief. That's the part nobody warns you about. One day you're married. The next day, strangers are discussing your entire life using folders and billing hours. Damien hired the best divorce attorney in Charlotte within 48 hours. Richard Halpern. Gray suit. Perfect teeth. The kind of man who charged $500 an hour to ruin people politely. My lawyer was a tired woman named Denise, who worked above a nail salon beside a laundromat. I found her through a church friend. That's how uneven the whole thing was from the beginning. Denise asked me during our first meeting if there were any shared assets hidden under my name, properties, accounts, investments. I shook my head no, because as far as I knew, there weren't. Damien handled everything financial, always had. At the time, I thought that was trust. Later, I understood it was control. The court hearings started in late September. Damien arrived every morning looking calm and expensive. Perfect suits, luxury watch. Vanessa waiting outside in the hallway, pretending not to be involved. I wore the same navy blouse to every hearing because it was the nicest thing I still owned. Funny how quickly marriage turns into inventory. Who keeps what? Who deserves what? Who sacrificed more? Who can prove it on paper? That's the important part. On paper. Because courts don't care about loneliness, or humiliation, or the years you spent shrinking yourself to keep somebody else comfortable. Courts care about documents. And according to Damien's documents, I owned nothing. The penthouse belonged to the company. The investment accounts were protected under corporate structures I barely understood. The vacation property had been transferred 6 months earlier. Even the cars were leased through business accounts. Everything clean, everything prepared. Like he'd been planning the exit long before he told me. Maybe he had. The final hearing lasted 19 minutes. 19. The judge reviewed the settlement, asked if both parties agreed. Damien answered first. Yes, Your Honor. Calm. Confident. Like a man ordering lunch. Then the judge looked at me. I remember my throat feeling dry. Mrs. Brooks? For 1 second, I almost said no. Not because I wanted the marriage back. Because I wanted someone, anyone, to acknowledge what had happened to me. But Denise gently touched my arm beneath the table. And I understood. The fight was already over. At least that's what I believed then. Yes, Your Honor, I whispered. The judge signed the papers less than 2 minutes later. 11 years ended by the movement of a pen. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting for Damien because one of his new luxury towers had just been featured in a business magazine. I watched him smile for cameras 20 minutes after our marriage officially died. Vanessa stood beside him wearing sunglasses and a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. At one point, Damien looked over at me standing alone near the courthouse steps. And do you know what hurt the most? He didn't look guilty. He looked relieved, like I had finally stopped being heavy to carry. That night, I packed the rest of my clothes into trash bags because I didn't own enough luggage for a life falling apart. The penthouse technically belonged to the company, which meant legally I had 36 hours to leave. I slept in my Honda Civic the first night after the divorce behind a 24-hour grocery store outside Raleigh. I remember rain hitting the windshield around 3 in the morning. I remember folding my coat under my head like a pillow. And I remember staring at the ceiling of that car thinking something over and over again. How did I become someone with nowhere to go? The next morning, I checked my bank account. $43. That was all I had left after legal fees. $43 and a marriage certificate sitting folded in my glove compartment. I found a cheap extended stay motel 2 towns over and paid for 3 nights. After that, I started applying for jobs. Any jobs. Waitressing. Cleaning. Reception work. Half the applications went unanswered. The other half looked at my age and employment gap and politely chose someone else. Eventually, I got hired cleaning rooms at a highway hotel outside Durham. Night shift. Same kind of work I had been doing before I met Damien. Life has a cruel sense of symmetry sometimes. Every night around midnight, I'd push a housekeeping cart through silent hallways while rich people slept behind locked doors. And every single night, I thought about the woman I used to be before I married him. The strange thing about humiliation is that after enough of it, you stop fearing it. You become numb, invisible, quiet. Exactly the kind of woman Damien believed he had erased. What he didn't know was that 3 weeks later his law firm was about to send me something they were never supposed to send at all. The email. 3 weeks after the divorce, I was cleaning room 214 at the Red Maple Inn when my phone buzzed inside my apron pocket. At first I ignored it. Most of the time it was spam calls or automated reminders about bills I couldn't pay. I finished changing the bedsheets before checking the screen. The email came from Halpern and Associates, Damien's law firm. My stomach tightened immediately. For one stupid, hopeful second, I thought maybe it was an apology. It wasn't. The subject line read, "Updated ownership transfer documents. Urgent signature review." I almost deleted it without opening. Then I noticed something strange. The email wasn't addressed to me. It was meant for someone named Gregory Mercer. Probably another attorney. Somebody inside the firm had typed the wrong email address. Attached were 3 PDF files. Corporate transfer agreements. Tax documents. Property holdings, the kind of paperwork I normally would have closed immediately because none of it made sense to me. But one sentence caught my eye before I exited the file. Minority ownership transfer, Elena Brooks. I froze. Actually froze. Standing there in room 214 holding a stack of hotel towels against my chest. I opened the attachment again. Slowly this time. Page after page of legal language. Percentages. Corporate structures. Signatures. Then I saw it. My name. Not once. Dozens of times. Elena Brooks. Minority shareholder. 30% ownership stake in Brooks Urban Development. I stared at the screen so long the hotel hallway lights shut off automatically outside the room. At first, I genuinely thought it had to be a mistake. There was no way. No possible way. Damien would have known. His lawyers would have known. Someone would have noticed. But the deeper I read, the worse it became. 5 years earlier, during a tax restructuring process, Damien had transferred 30% of the company into my name temporarily to avoid certain liability thresholds during an investor acquisition. The ownership was supposed to be transferred back 6 months later. It never happened. One missing signature, one unfinished filing, 5 years of nobody checking carefully enough. And legally, that meant 30% of his company still belonged to me. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed because my legs suddenly didn't feel stable anymore. My hands were shaking, not from excitement, from disbelief. You have to understand something. For 11 years, Damien controlled every financial conversation in our marriage. I signed things because he told me to sign them. Trusted him because he was my husband. I never imagined one of those signatures would someday become the thing capable of destroying him. I opened the final attachment, internal communication between attorneys. One line highlighted near the bottom. We need Elena to sign before Damien notices the ownership issue wasn't corrected during restructuring. I read that sentence 3 times. Before Damien notices, meaning he didn't know, not yet. The room around me suddenly felt very quiet, the air conditioner humming, ice machine rattling somewhere down the hall, my reflection faintly visible in the dark television screen across the room, and for the first time since the divorce, I felt something besides grief. Power. Small at first, fragile, but real. I forwarded every document to a brand new email account. Then I emailed copies to myself again. Then I uploaded them to cloud storage. Then I took screenshots of everything. Years of being married to Damien had taught me one important lesson. Powerful people move quickly once they realize they've made a mistake. That night after my shift ended, I sat inside my car in the hotel parking lot until almost sunrise, reading every page over and over again. 30%. Not alimony, not pity money. Ownership. And buried inside the final pages was something even more important. Projected valuation reports. Brooks Urban Development was worth almost $40 million, which meant legally my forgotten 30% stake was worth over $12 million. I remember laughing once, not happily, just in shock. Because 3 weeks earlier, I had been sleeping in this exact car, wondering how I would afford groceries. And now, somewhere across Charlotte, my ex-husband was sleeping peacefully beside his mistress, completely unaware that his entire empire legally belonged partly to the woman he thought he'd erased. That night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the number again. 30%. $12 million. By sunrise, I had read every document so many times I could practically recite sections from memory. But deep down, I still needed someone else to confirm it was real. Because if there is one thing life teaches poor people early, it's not to trust miracles. The next morning after my shift ended, I searched for corporate attorneys in Durham from the parking lot of a gas station. Most firms never called back after hearing my situation. A divorced hotel cleaner claiming partial ownership of a multi-million-dollar development company sounded insane. Honestly, I understood why. The fourth office transferred me to a woman named Naomi Ellis. Mid-40s. Corporate litigation specialist. Sharp voice. No wasted words. I met her the following afternoon in a small glass office overlooking downtown. I almost canceled twice before going inside. My shoes still smelled faintly like industrial cleaning chemicals from work, and every person in that building looked expensive, successful, certain of themselves. I remembered that feeling from Damien's world, the feeling of being tolerated inside rooms never designed for people like me. Naomi didn't smile when I sat down. She simply held out her hand. The documents. I gave her the folder. For almost 20 minutes, she read silently, no expressions, no reactions, just page after page turning slowly beneath her fingers. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since I walked in, she looked directly at me. "Mrs. Brooks," she said carefully, "do you understand what this is?" My throat tightened. "I think so." "No," she said quietly. "I don't think you do." She tapped one finger against the ownership agreement. "This isn't a clerical error. This is a legally executed ownership transfer that was never reversed." I stared at her. Naomi continued, "Your ex-husband's company filed years of corporate reporting listing you as an active minority owner. Taxes were structured around it. Investor disclosures reference it. Internal legal correspondence acknowledges it." She paused. "Legally speaking, this company belongs to you as much as it belongs to him." The room went completely silent. Outside the office windows, traffic moved through downtown like normal. People carrying coffee, cars stopping at lights, ordinary life continuing while mine completely changed direction. Naomi folded her hands together. "Does Damien Brooks know about this?" I shook my head slowly. "Not yet." That was the first moment she smiled. Not warmly, professionally, like a chess player recognizing a winning position. "Good," she said. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "What exactly do you want from him?" Nobody had asked me that before. Not during the marriage. Not during the divorce. Not even after the affair. Everyone kept asking what Damien wanted, what Damien deserved, what Damien built. But suddenly someone was asking about me. I looked down at my hands for a long moment before answering, "I don't want revenge." Naomi raised one eyebrow slightly. I took a breath. "I want him to understand what he did to me." Something in her expression shifted then, softer, almost human for the first time. She nodded once. "All right," she said. "Then let's make sure he understands it completely." Over the next hour, Naomi explained exactly how bad the situation truly was for Damien. Because my ownership was never legally removed, every major financial decision he'd made afterward could now be challenged. Property acquisitions, investor distributions, corporate borrowing. Even the penthouse technically fell under company ownership structures connected to my stake. And if this became public, the investors would panic, the board would panic, the banks financing his projects would panic. One forgotten signature. That was all it took. Naomi closed the final folder carefully. "We move quietly," she said. "No warning calls. No emotional confrontations. Powerful men make mistakes when they're comfortable." I thought about Damien smiling outside the courthouse after the divorce, confident, untouchable, certain I would disappear quietly. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled too. Very small, very calm, because suddenly I understood something he didn't. The woman he thought was powerless had finally found paperwork stronger than his money. For the next 10 days, I said nothing to Damien. I went to work, cleaned hotel rooms, folded towels, pushed my housekeeping cart through quiet hallways like nothing had changed. And every night after my shift, I met Naomi in her office, preparing, documenting, building. The first thing Naomi did was file an emergency ownership protection notice through corporate records. Quietly. No phone calls. No dramatic confrontation. Just paperwork. That was the thing I was slowly learning about powerful people. They build their lives using documents. And eventually, documents become the thing that destroys them too. By the second week, Naomi had uncovered even more problems inside Damien's company. Several investor reports listed ownership percentages incorrectly. One property loan had been approved using financial disclosures that legally should have included my signature. And the biggest problem of all, a new $80 million luxury project was scheduled for approval in less than 3 weeks. Without my authorization, the deal could freeze completely. Naomi looked almost impressed by how badly Damien's legal team had failed him. "Your ex-husband got arrogant," she said one evening while highlighting sections inside a contract binder. "Arrogant people stop double-checking things." Meanwhile, Damien still had no idea. At least, not yet. I know because he posted photos online constantly. Business dinners, private flights, Vanessa beside him smiling in expensive dresses. The comments underneath always looked the same. Power couple. Boss energy. Living the dream. Funny how polished lives look from outside. Then Tuesday happened. I was changing sheets in room 307 when my phone started vibrating repeatedly inside my apron pocket. Unknown number. Again. 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 5 missed calls in under 2 minutes. Then finally, a voicemail notification. I played it standing alone beside the hotel bed. Elena. Damien's voice, sharp, breathing hard. "Call me immediately." No greeting, no warmth, just control. The same tone he used during the marriage whenever something threatened him. A second voicemail came 3 minutes later. "What the hell did you file against my company?" There it was. He knew. I leaned slowly against the wall and closed my eyes, not from fear, from the strange calm that comes when the thing you've been dreading finally arrives. The third voicemail sounded different, less angry, more nervous. "Elena, this is obviously some misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? I almost laughed. 3 weeks earlier, he left me homeless. Now suddenly he wanted misunderstandings. By the time my shift ended that night, I had 11 missed calls. 2 from Damien, 9 from attorneys at Halpern and Associates. Naomi listened to every voicemail beside me in her office. Then she looked at me carefully. "You understand what's happening now, right?" I nodded slowly. "They're scared." "Exactly." She slid a folder across the desk toward me. Inside were updated valuation reports. Brooks Urban Development had increased in value after a recent acquisition announcement. My ownership stake was now worth closer to $14 million. $14 million. The number barely felt real anymore. Naomi folded her arms. Damien's entire expansion project depends on investor confidence. If ownership disputes become public, banks start asking questions. She paused, and investors hate questions. That night around midnight, Damien called again. This time I answered. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then finally, "What do you want?" Straight to it. No apology. No shame. Just negotiation. I stared out through Naomi's office window at the city lights below us. And suddenly, I remembered myself sleeping inside my car after the divorce. $43. Rain on the windshield. Humiliation sitting in my chest like concrete. "You told me our marriage was financially uncomplicated," I said quietly. Silence. Then Damien exhaled sharply. "Elena." "No," I interrupted softly. "You spent 11 years teaching me exactly how important paperwork is. I'm finally listening." His voice hardened immediately. "You think this makes you powerful?" I thought about that for a moment, then answered honestly, "No." I looked down at the ownership papers resting beside my hand. "But I think it makes us equal." And for the first time since I had met Damien Brooks, he hung up on me first. 3 days after Damien discovered the ownership issue, Naomi received the first settlement offer. It arrived by courier in a black envelope thick enough to feel expensive. Inside was a proposal from Halpern and Associates. Confidential resolution agreement. $12 million in exchange for immediate ownership surrender and permanent non-disclosure. Naomi slid the papers toward me across her desk. They're panicking faster than I expected. I stared at the number printed near the bottom of the page. $12 million. Enough money to change the rest of my life completely. Enough money to erase every fear I'd had since the divorce. Naomi watched me carefully. You can take it, she said calmly. Honestly, most people would. I thought about that for a long moment. Then I looked up. What happens if I don't? A very small smile appeared on her face. If you don't, this gets much worse for him. The next week became chaos inside Brooks Urban Development. Even from outside the company, I could feel it happening. Meetings canceled, investors suddenly requesting audits, rumors spreading through local business circles. One finance article mentioned unexpected internal restructuring complications, delaying Damien's newest luxury project. Naomi framed that article jokingly on her office desk, and for the first time in years, I stopped feeling invisible. Not because of the money, because suddenly, people had to acknowledge I existed. Damien called constantly during those days, sometimes angry, sometimes calm, sometimes pretending to care about me again. One voicemail actually said, "We can fix this together." Together. Funny word coming from a man who left me sleeping in a car. I never answered. Then Friday morning, Naomi received another call, this time directly from Damien himself. She put him on speaker without warning me. "Mr. Brooks," she said professionally. His voice sounded exhausted, older somehow. "I want to speak to Elena privately." No. A pause. Then he sighed heavily. "Fine. Then listen carefully. The board is demanding immediate resolution. Investors are threatening withdrawal. This has gone too far." Naomi leaned back in her chair. "No," she said calmly. "What went too far was illegally excluding a legal owner during divorce proceedings." Silence. Then finally, Damien spoke again, and for the first time he sounded afraid. "What does she want?" Naomi looked directly at me. This time I already knew my answer. I took a slow breath, then leaned toward the speakerphone. "I want the truth." Long silence. "Meaning?" Damien asked carefully. I felt strangely calm suddenly, like the fear had finally burned itself out completely. "I want you to admit what you did." Another silence, then a quiet, bitter laugh from the other side. "Jesus, Elena, this isn't emotional anymore. This is business." I looked at Naomi, then back toward the city outside her office windows. "No," I said softly. It was always emotional, and I ended the call. That same evening, Naomi filed formal notice requesting a full financial review of Brooks Urban Development, which meant every investor, every partner, every board member would soon learn exactly how Damien Brooks had accidentally hidden millions of dollars in ownership during his divorce. The story spread fast. Business blogs first, then local news, then larger financial outlets. By Monday morning, Damien's company stock had dropped 17%. Vanessa deleted every photo with him from social media, and somewhere across Charlotte, the man who once told me I was too weak to survive without him was discovering exactly how expensive it is to underestimate a quiet woman. The final meeting happened on a Thursday morning in a private conference room overlooking downtown Charlotte. Floor-to-ceiling glass, rain against the windows, 8 attorneys, 3 board members, and Damien sitting across from me, looking like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. It was strange seeing him like that. Smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the version of himself he'd spent years building was finally cracking under its own weight. Vanessa wasn't there anymore. Neither were most of the people who used to surround him at charity events and business dinners. Success attracts crowds. Scandal removes them. Naomi sat beside me wearing a charcoal blazer and reading glasses low on her nose. Calm as always. In front of us sat the final agreement. Brooks Urban Development would buy out my ownership stake for $14.8 million. In addition, I would receive partial rights to 3 rental properties still tied to the original ownership structure. The board wanted this over quickly, before investors pulled out completely. One board member, an older man named Keller, finally broke the silence. "Mrs. Brooks, we'd like to resolve this today, respectfully." Respectfully. Another interesting word. People only start talking about respect after they've realized they no longer control you. I looked down at the papers. $14.8 million. The number still felt unreal. But honestly, by then, the money mattered less than I expected, because something bigger had already happened. For the first time in 11 years, Damien was being forced to sit quietly while someone else decided his future. He looked at me finally. Really looked at me. Not through me. Not around me. At me. And quietly, almost carefully, he said, "I never thought you'd do this." I held his gaze. I know, the room went silent again. Then Naomi slid a pen toward me. One signature. Funny how life keeps coming back to signatures. I signed slowly, calmly, the same way he signed the divorce papers 19 minutes after ending our marriage. Except this time, I understood exactly what the paperwork meant. After the meeting ended, the board members left first. Then, the attorneys. Eventually, only Damien and I remained in the room, rain still tapping softly against the windows. He stood near the glass with his hands in his pockets. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then finally, he asked, "Were you ever going to forgive me?" I thought about it honestly. About the affair, the humiliation, the car, the years of becoming smaller beside him. And strangely, I realized forgiveness wasn't the important thing anymore. "I don't hate you, Damien," I said quietly. He looked surprised by that. I picked up my purse from the table. "But I don't belong to you anymore either." Then I walked out. Not angry, not triumphant, just finished. 3 months later, Brooks Urban Development sold 2 major projects to recover investor confidence. Damien stepped down as CEO before the end of the year. Quietly, no scandal interview, no dramatic collapse. Just another wealthy man disappearing behind carefully written press statements. And me? I bought a small house near the water outside Wilmington. Nothing enormous, nothing flashy, just white walls, a garden, a front porch, peace. I still work sometimes, not because I have to, because I like remembering who I was before money started deciding people's value. Every now and then, people online still ask if I regret not destroying Damien completely when I had the chance. The answer is no. Because revenge wasn't the point. The point was finally understanding something I should have known years earlier. Quiet women are not powerless. They're simply underestimated. And underestimated people can change everything with one forgotten signature. If you're listening to this right now, maybe some part of Elena's story felt familiar. Maybe you've spent years making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Maybe you've been the quiet one, the patient one, the person who kept giving chances long after respect disappeared. And maybe, like Elena, you were taught that love meant endurance, that if you stayed calm enough, loyal enough, understanding enough, eventually someone would value you for it. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes people don't recognize your worth until they lose access to it. And sometimes the most dangerous thing a person can do is finally stop accepting less than they deserve. Elena didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't destroy Damien publicly just because she could. She simply stopped shrinking. That's what changed everything. Not the money, not the lawsuit, not even the company. Just one quiet decision, the decision to finally see herself clearly. Maybe that's the real lesson in all of this. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes power looks like documentation, boundaries, silence, patience, and the courage to stay calm while someone else realizes they underestimated you. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who might need the reminder. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to walk away from people who only loved you when you were easy to control. And you are allowed to become impossible to overlook. This was the quiet verdict. Take care of yourself and take care of your future.